Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, and welcome to the third installment of I Don't Know What I'm Doing, YouTube Edition. In this episode, I'll be showing you my process of tackling an animation challenge slash practice that I've been meaning to try for a while now. I was super excited to work on this video, and I can't wait to share my process with you. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the idea for this video comes from a creator called Tonika. I think that's how you pronounce it. If that's wrong, I apologize. They post a lot of videos talking about practical tips and advice for traditional animation and things related to that sphere. I've watched quite a few of their videos and would absolutely recommend them if you have any interest in that topic. Anyways, they posted a video a while back talking about the strategy they picked up from a friend to help them practice animation. The concept is that you copy a live-action scene frame by frame in order to improve your skills. I love this idea because it solves two of my biggest hurdles in learning to animate: motivation and practice. It requires a special kind of motivation to sit down and work on something for hours and hours on end with very little to show for it at the end. Long story short, animation is hard, and it requires a ton of work to be even passably good. But loosely copying a live-action scene on fours? That takes way less effort, and a lot of the work is already done for you. You don't have to focus on timing or planning things out, you can just sit down and animate. But practicing is also about volume. The more you do, the better. Pretty self-explanatory. But that's difficult if you're trying to juggle multiple different creative mediums at the same time. Which I am. If I was focused solely on animation, it wouldn't be that hard. I could just sit down and do it. But I'm not. I'm just as much of an artist, a game designer, and a writer as I am an animator. Never mind the dozen other hobbies I have on the side. Again, copying live-action scenes helps with this. It provides a project that is both limited in scope and easy to start, continue, and finish. All this to say that this style of practice is easy, productive, and actually makes me excited to get started, which is really everything I'm looking for when I sit down to do anything creative, but especially when I'm trying to practice. Now, my process for this comes in three parts. First, I need to decide the scene I'm going to copy. Second, I need to actually do the practice, duh. And finally, third, I need to evaluate the outcome. Did the practice actually work? Was it as easy and helpful as I wanted it to be? And if not, what can I do to make it better next time? I feel like this is an element of improvement and skill development that I think a lot of people don't realize or tend to skip over. Practice is not a one-size-fits-all type of thing, and doing it well is an art unto itself, as I learned the hard way when I jumped headfirst into this project, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Now that you understand the context of the challenge, let's pick a scene. So I had a number of specific things I was looking for when selecting what I was going to animate. The first of those was that it should be an action scene, basically either a fight scene or a dance or something of that nature. There's two reasons for this. One is that action scenes are just easier to animate than scenes with more subtle movements. The other is that action just happens to be what I want to animate and what I enjoy working on, which is always a nice plus. The second big thing I was looking for was that I wanted it to involve a female character. I don't know why I decided to do this. Maybe it was because action tends to be biased towards masculine heroes, and I wanted to subvert that idea, or maybe because I just prefer drawing feminine, or at least not overtly masculine, characters. Sometimes you just have a gut feeling about something, and this was one of those times. Anyways, after scrolling past a number of offensive scenes that had nothing to do with what I was looking for, thank you, YouTube algorithm, I stumbled across a scene from a movie I'd watched recently and had greatly enjoyed. The movie was Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, Marvel's attempt at an apology for Iron Man 3. Wow, that is a reference that only hardcore Marvel fans will get. Specifically, the fight scene between Shang and Shu. Again, I apologize for my terrible pronunciation of non-English names. That was the best I could do. Minor spoilers for Shang-Chi, this is going to show one of its coolest fight scenes. Well, there's a lot of cool fight scenes, but one of them, and it's a movie I would highly recommend. I would tell you to pause this video and go watch it first, but we both know you're not going to do that, so I won't bother. Once I had chosen the scene, I then spent some time deciding where I wanted my animation to start and end, because I didn't want to waste time on the preamble or plot-related elements of the scene. I just cared about the fight itself. I ended up starting things right before Shu charges, beginning the fight proper, and ending it right after Shang is thrown across the stage. With the scene picked, I was so pumped to get started that I immediately jumped in and began to animate. The first day of animating did not go well. Almost as soon as I started, I discovered two unforeseen problems. The first was that, at least at this point in the animation, I was animating a character with black clothing on a dark background, which made it very difficult to tell what was going on. The second was that the scene had a lot of motion blur, which only served to compound the previous issue. I mean, say what you will about my drawing abilities, but trying to translate a dark, blurry mess into line art is no easy task. Needless to say that I didn't last very long before I had to stop and take a break. And then, when I finally returned for day 2, I ran into another slight problem. The original video I was copying didn't exist anymore. Now I'm gonna be honest, I seriously considered giving up at this point. This project was turning into a big, stressful mess, and I wasn't sure quite how to proceed. But I refused to give up just yet. I set out to copy a live-action scene, damn it if I wasn't going to try my hardest to get it done. So I started over. I found a new video and began animating from the beginning, this time taking more creative liberties with my rendering and sort of letting go of my need to make every frame look perfect. My goal was no longer to try and make a beautiful animation, but just to finish the dang thing without making me want to gouge my eyes out. Maybe that seems like a low bar, but if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that if you ever feel like giving up, it means you set the bar too high. It's better to achieve a small goal than to crash and burn on a big one. Speaking of crashing and burning, it was at this point I spent a couple of days procrastinating because both my mom and I got sick with Omicron. Now, being cooped up in our room with nothing else to do would have been the perfect time to grind things out, but something about being exhausted and sleep deprived didn't really put me in the mood. But eventually, I got back into the rhythm and ended up working on the animation for another 6 days or so. I wish I could brag about how much animation I got done, but the reality is I was only spending 30 minutes on it each day max. This was due to a variety of reasons, not least of which was recovering from being sick and dealing with increased anxiety. The end result was that even after a day of work, I had only about 4.5 seconds of animation to show for it, which is really not much. Or a lot, depending on how you look on it, but it's really not much. It was not even close to the amount I planned to do. I mean, at this point, the fight had barely even begun, let alone being close to finished. But I knew that I had to stop. At this point in the process, I was already over halfway through the month, and I hadn't even finished the script for this video yet. If I wanted to be done before the month was over, I was going to need to scale this project way back and make do with what I had. So I stopped working on the animation and instead focused my attention on, well, creating the video that you are now watching. Needless to say, this project ended up being way more of a learning experience than I expected it to be, which is kinda crazy considering that was the entire point of the challenge. But because there's so much to talk about, I'm actually going to divide the lessons learned here into 3 separate categories. Part 1, the challenge. I mentioned this already, but I did not anticipate how important the lighting of the scene would be to a project like this. Dark, amorphous shapes are hard to translate into line art even in the best of circumstances, let alone while trying to create a rough animation. Telling where one part of the body starts and the other ends, or whether an object should be passing in front of a character or behind them, is very difficult if the reference you're using just looks like a black void. The prevalence of motion blur also didn't help, to the point that it took me like an hour to figure out that Jiu has these weird black gloves that cover the top of her fingers, which makes it almost impossible to tell what they're doing with their hands in the close-up shots. Eventually, I just gave up and drew them as blobs to save time and my sanity. Thankfully, this was mostly an artistic problem. I just had to pick if I wanted to draw the blur, which I did, and how I wanted to render it, which I decided to do with motion lines that trailed behind the person or object. This not only conveys the blur, but also serves to help with implied motion, since I was cutting live-action footage down to only 6 frames per second, which, yeah, is a pretty big jump. But if I was going to do this challenge again, I would definitely pick a fight scene with better contrast and a lot less darkness. I also underestimated the amount of work the scene would take. Part of that is just me fighting my perfectionist tendencies, but the other part is that animating just takes a lot of time, even when you know what you're doing, and not knowing what you're doing makes it take even longer. The end result is that there was no way I was going to finish this fight scene in a month. Maybe I could have if I was animating the whole time, but certainly not on top of writing and producing a YouTube video. Speaking of producing a YouTube video, Part 2, Video Production. I knew going into this month that this video was going to push the envelope in terms of production time, which in hindsight should have been a red flag. I tried to trim some things from the video to reduce the workload, like recording myself creating some splash art instead of making more stickers, but that didn't work. Like at all. I realized almost immediately afterwards that having some cringy, rough animation frame in the thumbnail made way more sense than creating a whole new piece of art, and I had already figured out the format and style of the stickers while I prepared absolutely nothing for this splash art. The end result being that I just ended up making the stickers anyways, eating up a whole 3 days of work on something I had specifically tried to trim out, and adding more work to be done during the editing process, since, I had to set up all of the stickers now. All of this was a mistake. I should have underestimated my abilities and overestimated the time it would have taken. After all, it would have been much easier to get 90% of the way through, realize I had plenty of time left, and add something extra than to trim something out last minute, which is essentially what I had to do. As my mom often says, take however much time you think a task is going to take, and add 50%. Because it's never as easy or as quick as you think it will be. Speaking of things not being as quick or as easy as you think, Part 3, Health and Sanity. Newsflash, my life is a mess. This probably won't come as a surprise to anyone that watched my last video, but my mental and physical health has been less than great. As of recording this, I am beginning to feel better, but for most of this month, I was struggling with insomnia, anxiety, and digestive issues. Just the whole shebang. Now add on top of that like 5 RPG campaigns and several other projects, and you get a recipe for disaster. For basically the last week, I've been too much of an anxious mess to even think straight, let alone create a YouTube video. Do I regret working on this video? A little, but not really. Do I regret picking such an ambitious project for a video? Yes I do. That was definitely a bad idea, and I should have known better. Unfortunately, I didn't, so now I have the next 6 days to make 2 more stickers and edit this entire video. What could possibly go wrong? God, I hope this video doesn't turn out to be as much of a mess as I think it will be. Let's be honest, it probably will. So, what do you guys think? Would you want to try a challenge like this in the future? If so, what changes would you make, if any? Or is there any takeaways that you have from my horrible mistakes? If so, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to see more stuff like this in the future, you can also hit the subscribe button. I'm going to try and post a new video about once a month, so feel free to set notifications to all and get notified about future uploads. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!